Hello and welcome, folks. We are at November 22nd, 2022, and it is 5:30 Mountain Time, and we're jumping on to a ripple effect. We're grateful for those that have logged on. We're going to play a quick video while folks are coming in. Here. Thank you for taking the time there as we kind of get set up. We're actually, again, for those that did not hear, today is November 22nd, 2022, and we're focused on a ripple effect. We actually did one this morning at 11:30 Mountain Time, primarily for folks over in the Middle East and Israel, based upon their time zone. It's just a really difficult time, and they got a lot of people together. So we're grateful for those that came on and attended. Just to be real quick and kind of run through these intros, today is just a quick review of new advancements and general Q&A. We're grateful for those that are on from a support standpoint. These are individuals, if you see their names, feel free to ping them with questions that may be direct or indirect or support related. You know the drill. And we're grateful for you taking the time. I know it's a crazy time in the in the world of humanity and dispensations of time, but it's also a wonderful time to be alive, and we're grateful to share it with you. This is a private membership association, and some of the things we'll talk about may be forward-looking comments. The model may be complex. In all reality, it's basically doing what we're currently doing, but in a decentralized way. It's complex to put it together. It's complex to get it adopted, but it actually is more natural than what we're currently doing. For those of you that don't remember, we actually used to host our own email servers. We used to host our own file servers. We used to have them in our homes and in our businesses. It was a normal thing. It's called, server networking, LAN WAN, file, print, messaging. We used to do it all. Now, instead of centralizing it, or instead of putting it in our own place, we're centralizing all of it. There's economies of scales and benefits that can come from it, but there's also a lot of negativity. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The model is simple. What we're discussing is basically connecting up a decentralized phone with decentralized storage, and encryption and derived keys is really how that all comes together. For those that want to ask questions, go to rippleeffect.clear.events, and you can ask questions live. Or we're actually, if you've got any of the channels, which I should probably check an audio. Let me check an audio testing. We may not have audios on some of the other channels. I have to figure out why that is. But anyhow, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's all streaming on those platforms. But to ask questions, go to this URL. That's if you want to do it kind of live and those types of things. So one thing I'd like to start out with today is basically a message. We're not outnumbered. Will we be out organized? Because right now, I don't know about you, but as I start understanding things that we thought may happen before the vaccinations and things that are happening after, and again, we don't want to focus or talk about that stuff, but in all reality, we're in a war. Whether you want to call it a war between good versus evil, or a war between big tech or small tech, it is a very real ecosystem, so to speak. So grateful for those that are at least engaged in it. I've seen a lot of people when times get tough, whether it's understanding the technology or being involved in it or using it or when last probably what was it 4 or 5 months ago when we actually figured out there's some real problems with some of the math. Um, and folks that were getting paid for things that we weren't even getting paid for. So it created a negative cash flow type side of it. It's been interesting to watch individuals that have just hung in there and individuals that have checked out versus individuals that have doubled down. It's been eye opening to see. Um, the hard thing is it's really just the beginning because what I've personally kind of understood is certain things in the financial industry as they go and reset, they are actually shutting off supply. Even though they're pumping systems full of money, that is not reaching the normal Joe and Schmo and cash flow situations. If in economics you understand that there is usually a financial measurement that's for foreign exchange and trade, and there's a measurement that's internal. It's usually what you would pay a mortgage with or what you'd get payroll with. And those things are literally becoming very scarce on the internal, primarily because a lot of it is being limited. And I won't go. Well, no, I'll go into the reasons why. You have a lot of the electronic payments that are basically tightening up within the merchants and the requirements behind them, and even some of the mandates, so to speak. I'll just leave that at that. But I guess what it comes down to is will we actually unite together and will we be organized enough to overcome what's coming? This last week, you've seen a lot of different things with different countries, maybe not liking new leadership, not liking a polling system or what they'd call a voting system. Um, New regimes that are coming in that it's all about the wrong drivers and the individuals not being heard. And that comes from Brazil all the way to Israel down to South Africa or even other parts of Africa. But many of us just ignore it because it doesn't really hit our own world. But what I would say is it's a litmus test for the future. What's happening in Australia, what's happening in Canada, happening in Belize, what's happening in I can't say Mexico. There's not a lot down there that's really, but these are all symptoms of other parts of the world. It'll just continue to roll out in different ways. In New Zealand, you've got neighbors that are basically tasked with telling on their other neighbors if there's compelling events or issues. But before I forget, I'm going to do a real quick poll here. If you've got questions or comments on the last topics, you're welcome to comment. But I'm going to do a quick poll. I just sent it out to folks. And this was asked earlier because we're getting so many folks at this other, like literally a lot, like 3, 4, 5 times the amount that are showing up at 5:30, but they're showing up early in the morning. So one of the polls, if you navigate over to your chat and click on polls, you'll see a question. What is the best time for the ripple effect for you? So this is for your individual schedule, your time. And this is usually it's everything we do is based upon mountain time, but 5:30 p.m. mountain time every Tuesday or 10:30 a.m. mountain time every Tuesday. So if you could just go ahead and click which one, or another choice is either is fine. So if you could just kind of click which one works with your particular schedule, that would be greatly appreciated. It's just helping us schedule as we've got a lot of other demands in other parts of the world and other time zones that are just requesting it. And instead of doing two in the same day, we're thinking about basically just switching it up. So every other week. So 5:30 one week, then 10:30 the next week, then 5:30, then 10:30. So that's kind of a thought that we're having, but based upon this data, we'll be able to know what is right. So we'll go ahead and give you another 30 seconds. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. So the consistency is what you're saying. Hey, just stay consistent. It works. Don't break it. Don't mess with it. Okay. Um, I agree with that. It's been like clockwork. We've only missed one because we didn't even miss it. I couldn't get a system up because I broke it, when I was out of the office. So, but basically, we're ending up with 44% say 5:30 Mountain Time. That's consistent with the comment. 11% are saying 10:30 Mountain Time, and I think a lot of the folks that were on the call earlier today, they're sleeping right now. That's why. And then either is 44%. So appreciate your feedback, guidance. I'm actually going to take note of this before we trash it. Okay. Um, some interesting rumor mill. Some folks are they've put in some chats here around died suddenly. I won't say much about it, but I will ask everybody's opinion. What's your thoughts of it if you've seen it? If you haven't seen it, it's basically a documentary that is well done based upon data. It's actually kind of comical at the beginning because they just talk about, hey, this is what they said, this is what's happening. It's pretty blatant, but yeah. Any thoughts? Has anybody seen it by raise of hand or? Yeah, go ahead. If you, I mean, you probably don't have to raise your hand. You can just unmute and just comment. Those two, three people that wanted to say something, feel free. Steve, Annette, Margaret, have you seen it by chance? Oh, good. Um, there's a video that's out called "Died Suddenly." Have you heard of that? You haven't seen it. You have Okay, but you haven't seen it yet. Okay, no worries. Okay. Uh, those are yeah. On one hand, you want it to not be true and the data to not be real, and you want to just kind of wake up from this and just say it was a joke, but it's reality. So, any other thoughts or comments as that relates? Feedback? Maybe how it relates to what we're doing with decentralization and technology? I think, for those of you that were around when we talk a lot about information and data, wouldn't it be nice for people to be able to have their own data and track it in some standard ways and then have reporting based upon that? So we could actually see anomalies and together we could share data, but it's not private data, but it's still statistical data. So let's say you had a headache once a month and certain things would happen, then you could figure out that this would occur, and then you took this, or maybe it was a leaf, maybe it was whatever, and you had certain outcomes. So you have some symptoms, you have a recommended treatment, and then you have outcomes. The data that's within that, it could change a lot of things if we could just gather that data and use it. Historically, we'd take it and pass it down from different generation to generation within different ecosystems. Maybe it's a tribe. When I was in Boy Scouts long ago, I remember this dinky little leaf that they said, hey, if same use case, if you have a headache, you basically just rub it and then chew it, and your headache goes away. Well, how does that relate to what they're doing with aspirin or ibuprofen or different level? I mean, my point is what really works? What's been given to us? How do we actually know? And is it something that actually, you know, I guess what it comes down to is in the pharmaceutical world, there's money to be made. Pharmaceuticals, for those that don't understand what it is, they basically are synthetically replacing what's naturally occurring in nature. And they usually do it with a weight or the little white pills. You ever wonder what those come from? It's a form of race brand that they basically put synthetics into to then push into the body. And they make money with it along the way. Um, we actually did IT for one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. They still are. Actually, one of the drugs that they make, I just mentioned, but I won't be specific. And there was a lady there that we worked with. And I remember her, I'll just be specific with her first name. Her name was Pam. And she'd been with this organization for probably 23, 24 years. And she came to me one night and she said, um, I can't do it anymore. We're killing people and we know it. And it's all about money. And for me, this was something that actually hit like years ago. I think this is probably 2004, 2004, 2005. And that's one of the reasons why we opened our eyes long before a lot of this stuff actually started occurring, separate from other, I'll put vaccines in one camp and pharmaceuticals in another camp. But really, what it comes down to is our bodies. Is there really such things as viruses? Is it natural for us to get sick? Is good versus evil apply to health? And all these are questions that basically kind of popped. But I know you're here to learn about technology and kind of what's new in the ecosystem. First off, I'll jump over to Cyber Monday is coming up. This actually went live last night. For those in Australia and other parts of the world, specifically priced at 23% off, so that with the foreign exchange conversion, it still hopefully stays underneath that taxation topic. So please see if that happens. Also, for those that were not aware, we were able to get the new shipping pricing for all of the international shipment stuff down. Like we actually reviewed one to Israel this morning. It was like $43. So that is totally in line. So we're just, whether we're talking shipping or timing or pricing, there's some pretty big significant opportunities here. Cyber Monday usually goes from now and until Monday next week, so to speak. But this will go for as supplies last. So that's on both the ClearNote and ClearPhone. So both of them combined for $43.20 and 23 cents. And then for the ClearPhone 620 at $923 and 23 cents, which is usually $11.99, so $1,200. So 23% off on both of those. And they are ClearUnited eligible. And we're actually pulling out the subscription side of it as it ties to these. And so there's a really good argument that was made earlier on when we found out, hey, there's so much clawback and things that were paid for that shouldn't have been, and a lot of auditing and new systems building that had to go in to basically rectify 5+ months worth of at least the last of balancing, so to speak. But some of the folks made a really logical justification, and it was easy to do some of the audit side behind it, which was we're not selling subscriptions. So the monthly recurring revenue, if the product was actually purchased and shipped and paid for, then there should be an easy way to account for it and fund it out. So we basically have kind of separated that and working through a process of getting those things trued up. But you need to understand that these things have ClearUnited eligibility on them, and we're starting to pull the subscriptions and separate the subscriptions from all of it. So be aware of that. There'll also be some changes to the subscriptions overnight. So if you want them included, now's the first time that you can basically do it. You just come down and it's automatically coded here. So you can kind of see, where you end up with already. So you'll also note that there's only two options for cellular. So 39 and 59. So heads up on new purchases there. Otherwise, there's no real new difference. Those are pretty drastic differences, and we hope that you guys take advantage of those. So right now, the 620Xs are not included in the promo, but there is a request to basically push those out. So that's one thing that I know has been brought up prior. Um, yeah, just looking at some of the comments there, but we'll go ahead and just open up to general question and answer. If you've got any questions, feel free to go ahead and pop them out now. If not, if any of the moderators have questions, I'll go check some of the other channels. Go ahead. Go ahead. Ladies first. Go ahead. Whoever that was. I've read, I've actually read that. Yeah. Yeah. You're spot on. 100%. And I go ahead. Yeah. Well, it's a privacy act that they enacted that basically says, "This is our privacy, and for you to violate it, you need to provide notice. We need to agree to it, and then if we don't, and you do these things with our data, then we will fine you." So as the European Union enforcing GDPR, we will fine you a certain dollar amount based upon the revenues that you've taken. And we'll notify you that you need to remove this data if you've collected it that's not in compliance with our ordinances of GDPR. And they provided all the due process, all the notice, all, and then and they've gone after Facebook, Microsoft, Google, and they've won. They've gone after certain religious organizations and just crazy stuff. But I think the GDPR topic ties a lot to the tools and weapons that you just brought up. And this changing world order, and by the way, I love Tony Robbins, absolutely love him. Um, he's added so much value to humanity. When that man wraps up his days, I can only imagine the impact that he's had worldwide. So, but this book is really a good book. And what your comment is spot on, which is I'll just try and paraphrase it. It's basically technology is, and I talked about this earlier on the ripple effect this morning. Technology is what's different between now and any prior war or disruption. And those that are on the centralized side of the technology that's being basically distributed to the world can actually control the rest of the world. And what this is saying is it doesn't matter if it's economy topics, physical topics, land topics, geopolitical topics, war topics, the technology. For instance, what's the first thing that goes down in war? It's usually communication, intelligence. I mean, look at what happened with Ukraine and Russia. Certain folks stepped up and said, "We'll make sure that they've got internet connectivity via satellite throughout the whole country." And look at what that type of intelligence and data enabled them to be able to do. I mean, just this morning, I looked at tanks being blown up. I looked at, you're talking about warfare that's very different being fought with drones that are dropping bombs instead of planes. And I'm talking homemade, these drones are, something that's $1,000 or $2,000 compared to, a plane that's millions. And they could even run the whole thing right into a tank and take it out. But it's a matter of intelligence, understanding. I mean, when you really back into it, you look. There's another book called, and I don't recommend you read this, as a matter of fact. Uh, but it really ties a lot to what we're talking about. This book, The Art of War, very, very interesting book. There's also another one that I'd recommend on the art of peace, which is it's not by Sun Tzu, but it's a very good one as well. Anyways, this book here, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And have you been through the whole thing, or is it just something that you popped into, Becca? Awesome, awesome. Well, it really is. Mhm, mhm. That reminds me of this saying right here. It's like, we're not outnumbered, will we be out organized? And I would say right now, we're actually being out organized. We're not. Yep, you're spot on. Absolutely spot on. Do you feel like the Tony Robbins things was positive in your world? Have you seen outcomes from it? No. Well, I keep popping those thoughts and those recommendations in because they really do matter. They're appreciated. Other thoughts, comments, feedback? Brett, it's nice to see you. Miss you, buddy. And then some. James, hope all is going well. Bob, same thing. For those that were, I remember there was a couple folks that were from Bermuda on here. This FTX thing just unraveling, and you talk about Becca, you talk about keys. That's a perfect example of why keys are so imperative. I mean, literally, we're talking, and these are supposedly smart people. Like, we're talking the best of the best hedge funds, equity funds, venture funds. These are also funds that are public fund. Like, we're talking people's retirements, all these different systems. These are good stewards, supposedly. They don't do any kind of security due diligence on true cryptography or key management. And they make these bets, crazy bets. And as of just even what I was going through within the last 24, 48 hours, they don't even understand the amount of damage and lies and theft that has gone on. It's in the cryptographic world. Crypto equals cryptography equals math. If you're doing it right, you don't even need to worry or trust other people because you're the one that has the stewardship of your own keys, you know? And even if there's an element of they've been compromised, there's a key rotation process that can go in there. So it's just baffling. And I wonder how much damage, because there's FTX is not the beginning and it won't be the end. Even though I think FTX is one of the biggest nightmares in the crypto ecosystem, there'll be another one in the next 3-4 months. Keep an eye out for um, certain liquidity pools behind certain stable assets or stable coins. So one of them, USDC has a ton of backing from some of the biggest names in the industry. But there's others that are kind of like USDC, but it's not a C. It might be a T, like Mr. Tom. And I don't want to be negative, but I've looked at the data, and I'm telling you, it's just a matter of time. Unless there's certain things like what happened with USDC, where certain backers come in and actually back it and support it. But value should be held with the individual. Assets should be held with the individual. As long as they're providing more value in society and consuming less, then they should be able to continue to supposedly save and garner and then have it in their own world, and then hopefully build something up and pass it on to generations, or use it, or you know do the opposite. Why can't you go and create value for the first 50 years of your life, and for the second 50 years of your life, hopefully we're all 100, right? But statistics won't say that. But let's say for the second 50 years of your life, you can actually start pulling value out. You can start benefiting from it. So other questions, topics, thoughts, feedback, interactions? If not, we've already been going for 2 hours, well, an hour and a half today on Ripple Effect. So we're over 6 o'clock. We'll call it if there's nothing. Otherwise, we'll let you guys have the floor here for another couple minutes. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So for those that aren't aware, I live in a little mountain valley, and we've got animals. And some of these animals, by the way, we had a horse that passed away today, which is a different conversation. But we basically get retirement horses, and so they just come out to a pasture. But we've also got different kinds of animals, from sheep to cows to goats to pigs to chickens, and just these different animals, primarily because when we lived in New Zealand, each one of our kids got one, and it was the best way to raise kids. Teaches responsibility, because if you don't feed the animals, there's consequences. They'll either eat other animals, or they die. And then reproduction, I think it's one of the most beautiful lessons to teach it in the real world. I won't even make comments on that. And just general life and death. So you got life and death, reproduction, and responsibility. And we just started having these animals. So when we moved to New Zealand, we continued that here in these mountains, so to speak. And the city that we live in is a well-run city, but they have some laws, historical laws. Have you ever heard, like, for instance, here in America? I know lots of you are in different parts of the world, but here in America, we have this thing called Turkey Day, or Thanksgiving, where the pilgrims came over. We actually gave thanks for so much, and so we've kept it going on. So Thanksgiving is this week. But do you remember the fairy tale, the wives' tale, where a woman would basically, and it was usually this woman, and I'm going to talk about that because they talk about the women passing down from generation to generation. I'm not saying that's how it should be or not. Like in Samoa or Tonga or these different, it's the men that do the cooking. But my point is grandmothers would pass down to their grand posterity. I'll just say posterity. They would cut off the two ends of a chicken or a turkey, and then put it in a pan and put it in the oven. And it was the one day they questioned, why do we do this? And it was like, well, I don't know. And what they figured out over time was the turkey used to not fit in the oven, but now the ovens have gotten bigger, but they still cut the turkeys. So it's like in this city that we live in, they basically say there's no pigs, no swine, no pigs. And so, and I actually, you guys know me, I'm one that won't just take it for what they write. And first off, I questioned the authority of the city because it's a corporation, and the corporation was actually created after the Supreme Court had a ruling against a water well, and then they incorporated the city. But it's an incorporation, right? And I remember we love and agree with decentralization. You put the authority out to the certain ecosystems. And so in this case, it was okay, so a federal government has given a state and then a county and then a city certain jurisdictions and rights to do certain things. So in the digital world, in this ecosystem here, we're going to be doing something similar when we talk about these councils. So just like we just had a vote, when do we want to have a meeting? People have opinions and we just lock it in and go. But imagine, so that's human involvement, but imagine with technology where we can basically say we would like certain things to happen. Well, what if it's abusive? What if it's overreaching? What if it violates the first document that was created? In this ecosystem, the first document is this declaration. So in my case, I actually went before this city and said, you're not doing a good job being fiduciaries and making laws because they're violating a constitutional law. And that constitutional law is you can contract with another party, and the cities or others can't create laws that violate that contract as long as you're not hurting someone else. Danielle pointed that out last week. And so I just wanted to report back. The judge made their decision and started a process, so to speak. And basically where we're ending up is the certain types of pigs that we have, because first off, it was like I put somebody on the stand that had been on the city council for forever. He raised pigs when he was young. He's probably wonderful man. I'll just call his name Michael B. And he's probably in his 60s, but he was like, it's always been there. And I don't know why it's been there. And so to make a long story short, the city questioned it and they actually listened and they did what was right. And you know what they're doing? They're actually changing the law to actually accept. So my message was, hey, it's not right what's happening, and we'll continue to push it, but it's the right thing to do is for this body to recognize that there's a higher law that everyone should abide by, so to speak. But at the same time, a local government should also have the ability to have certain regulations or rules around usage or governance that's positive for the people. That's good, but it should have also an interaction of questioning, which it totally worked. So to make a long story short, they sent out a message yesterday, went in and met with them, and they're literally this certain breed of pigs, because their message was, we don't know why. One, we think it might be noise, it might be stink, it might be destruction of damage to property. Well, and they didn't have a case on any of those. And this other gentleman, Mike, when he said, you know what, people that basically have cows and take their vehicle and they drive a big thing of horse dung or cow dung down the road, what's the difference between smelling? It's kind of like polluting with a plane in the air with noise. You're polluting with quiet. The goal is we're here to have quiet enjoyment here on this earth, to have peace, to have joy, to have happiness. And sometimes, the counterbalance is you may not have those things. You may have a violation of your peace or your quiet or your joy, or you may mess it up on your own choices and cause other problems. But the point is society should not stop us from being able to have that quiet enjoyment. And in this particular case, they recognized it, they saw it, and they said, you know what? It's got hair, it can make it through cold. And don't get me wrong, these things are crazy, but they're so fun. They come to you, they listen to you, they're like little. And the other point to it was they eat. So they're not your normal, digestive system for pigs. as long as they're brought up a certain way. And we're talking about, and this is one of the things, we're talking about real milk and then onto grass. So if they're brought up a certain way, these pigs actually eat grass, kind of like sheep. So they're not your typical, so in other words, they don't, most pigs or swine, they don't have hair, they can't stand the cold, and they like to eat everything and everybody. If you want to dispose of a body, you cut it up and throw it over the fence and they'll eat the whole thing. But in this particular case, these guys just eat grass all day long, like they're like herds, like sheep. They'll just go around eating grass. So I know you probably didn't sign up for talking about somebody's pigs, but the point that I'm driving at is everyone has the right to stand up. Everyone has the right to basically question what is right or wrong. Um, yeah, so hopefully that's the report out there. I want to, there's another thing that I wanted to run through. I'm going to, I'm going to wrap up with a pretty important message, and I'm going to find. I'm going to first start out by prefacing this is a speech given by an individual who actually runs communications and justice for a small little island. For those of you that know Wally, he spent 2 years of his life near this island. It's kind of in between here and where those that are on the call from Australia live. We'll just leave it at that. And the year prior to this, he basically gave a speech similar to this, where he was standing at a podium and talking and then zoomed out. And as they zoomed out, they saw that his podium was actually underwater. And it's very telling because this is an individual, one, he's indigenous. Two, sovereignty means something. Three, he runs his own country, his own currency, own passports, own identity. Okay, I'm going to put all that stuff out, and then what I'm going to do is just let him play through this here for you real fast. I hope you can hear it. Wally, I'm going to put it inside of a chat here real fast. If you grab it and share it on your side, maybe you or someone else can actually just share it because it's important to hear his voice. He does such a good job. Who's playing that? Share your screen though. There's a button with a screen. So go ahead and pause it. Go ahead. Go ahead and pause it. There you go. And then down below, you'll have an arrow with a screen. Just go ahead and click on that puppy. You select what screen you want to share, and then we'll be able to see your video. So inside of Clear One, next to where your chat box is, where your video stream is. Oh no. Are you on an iPad or something? Or what kind of system are you on? It should work just fine. Somebody else want to give it a shot? Yeah. Just do entire screen. Well, if you've got one screen and that's what you're sharing. Anybody, we can all do it at the same time. Let's see who does it first. Yeah, that's from a phone. That'll end up struggling after time. That's not a good way to do it. But that's awesome. So you're actually using clear meat. That's awesome. Well done. This is actually something that struggles. You may end up blowing up your phone with this. Well, yeah, we got you, Danielle. Just go ahead and expand that. And if everyone wants to, go ahead and start it over. Bob, I'm gonna go ahead and mute you, bud, because you're gonna bump into some problems. I'm sorry. There we go. Yeah, go ahead. Thanks. You wanna expand your. Much. Thanks, Daniela. So I don't know if you really recognize or understand what this gentleman is talking about, but his land. Thank you. But think about it. Right in the middle of the island, you can have a garden, and the next thing you know, salt water is basically just coming up and killing your plants, your way of life, having to import food from other parts of the world, changing the health and the vitality of the people. So they end up moving out. Majority of the people that are actually natives there actually are populated in New Zealand now. Um, Imagine the pressure to be able to figure out how to navigate such a shift of there are about 11,000 people that are citizens now today. But when he talks about that shared responsibility, and I don't know what your perspectives are around global warming, but there's no argument that the world changes, weather changes. Like right where I am, it's 6,000 feet, goes up to 12,000 feet, and this used to be all underwater. They used to call it Lake Bonneville. Now it's the Great Salt Lake, which is actually one of the biggest salt ecosystems, similar to what they deal with, but nothing can live with the salt. Actually, that's not true. Brine and other things, other types of things live with salt. Salt is an amazing thing. That's a different conversation. But what I'm driving at is imagine the task that he or his team or his people must feel around having to have the responsibility to act. So humanity talks a ton about global change, and they end up talking a lot about project finance and throwing money at things, but do they really actually make a difference? Does a man like this have a pressure that is relieved from his shoulders or their people that is actually adding value, or is it just people just throw more money at it? And he talks about having to act. Last year it was he gives this presentation in water. This year he gives this presentation building out a digital ecosystem. Only, in my opinion, a portion of what he talks about is around sovereignty. Once he starts figuring out that the metaverse is actually just a cumulation of metadata, that is actually just the sovereignty's thrown out the window. But when they understand key management, key rotation, true identity management, true sovereignty, true financial systems where, you don't even have to have a server there. You can literally, we can all share that risk and pressure and weight that this individual and this people have on them. And it's not just him. There are, like, just in the last 72 hours, identified probably 13, maybe 14 other ecosystems that are like this, where their language, their people, their history, their culture could truly go extinct because they'll be forced to literally diversify and just separate and go to different parts of the world like they did with New Zealand. They're not asking for a handout. These are people that understand how to survive. They understand how to serve. They understand how to navigate. These are survivors. But when we look at this digital world, and I'll kind of just jump from here over to this ecosystem, when we look at this digital world, what you see is not just services that are for the individual that are free or for the resident or for a citizen, but they'll also be for countries. Because imagine in the digital world, you can get certain types of digital services such as membership, apps, life, training, identity, voting, wallet, health, organizations, or the ability to create different businesses or assets, or, kind of like what we're on right now, where you can share video streams. All of this is digital, but imagine the ability, not just for your basic communications and information. Yeah, exactly. You can't stop climate change. It's a natural thing. The earth, it's how the earth works. But the point that I'm trying to drive at is there is an ability for all of us to work together to actually serve those ecosystems. And we hope to be able to work with a lot of them as this digital world offers tons of these services, you know, notary services, financial services, marriage, asset management, forensics, dispute resolution, and even tying it into certain types of farms. I promise there's something that they can grow on that little tavu, which is maybe it's papayas, maybe it's mangoes, maybe it's um, vanilla, maybe it's figs. There's something that they can grow that's different. And even when their land goes away, it's not that it's gone. For instance, Most folks don't know this, but everything that we do, by the way, we'll talk about Eve in a little while, but everything that we're talking about starts with the phone, but it's really not about a phone. But what is the phone actually built on? Oh, here, I'll stop sharing and reshare here for you. Maybe that'll reset it for you. So you should be able to see. It's because you were sharing, that's why it didn't, you had to click on me. So what I'm driving at is inside of these phones, there's different minerals and elements. One of the most valuable elements and what they talk about actually hurting climate change, can you guess what it is? Lithium ion phosphate batteries and the elements to basically go into constructing these. But did you know that most of the actual elements are found in this gentleman's backyard in the Pacific? But they're underwater. And did you know that when you actually mine underwater, what they talk about as carbon impact or footprints is like 20% of it? And did you know that the people that actually stopped that and argued against that, they stopped that mining? For instance, these types of little nation states and countries that are either atolls or islands or active volcanoes in some cases, they're only put look at Atutaki, like the Cook Islands, okay? This is an ecosystem where these people have literally lived sovereign for a very long time. And they do their best to not go and take any kind of resource from external. As a matter of fact, when COVID happened, they locked down the borders, and you know what they gave out? They asked for $200,000 worth of seeds. They started growing their own food. What a concept. But prior to that, they and others took out loans, namely against countries like China and others like New Zealand and others. And then when COVID hit, they figured out they couldn't pay these loans back. And so, you know what they're guaranteeing these loans with were the docks and the roads and the cellular and the internet infrastructure that they basically brought in to use along with, creating lifestyles and livelihoods for people. But when they guaranteed them they couldn't pay them back, do you know what they're actually going after? And if it's not done with intelligence, they can be robbed. And I believe, and I don't condone terrorism, but one of the biggest reasons why terrorism exists is because of unfair trade and control in these certain ways. So the answer to a lot of this that I'm talking about is they're actually going after seabeds to mine lithium iron phosphate batteries or the minerals for the batteries. Now, this is an asset that's in the earth. What we have to identify with is we are all, and I'll just say it this way, we're all brothers and sisters here on this earth, one way or another. We're having an experience in the same time frame, same dispensations, and whether we recognize this earth can actually feed us, sustain us. We think about it. Do we have to worry about fresh oxygen? I mean, it pops off these plants. As we breathe carbon dioxide, it comes the opposite way to oxygen. Or look at water. I mean, it's just some of the simplest things are just given to us. And then all we have to do is rub them together. You take a seed, you take some soil, you take the sun, you take some water. Next thing you know, you have a huge tree, like a little, they talk about a mustard seed, but take like an acorn. That thing turns into something bigger than this room is. I mean, it's just amazing. So the point that I'm driving at is the digital world's jurisdiction is the earth. But imagine a value exchange where certain things like maybe farms could actually be purchased or sponsored and then share the burden or the risk or the work to create livelihoods, to create incomes, to leverage these different parts of the world. We've all been told by our own sweat off of our own brow is how we should actually go and do and even survive or eat. Now, does that mean it's directly? Well, what we've been relying on historically is centralized monocrop. And now people are saying, hey, well, you got to worry about, and if you haven't watched that video Died Suddenly that we talked about earlier, right at the beginning, they talk about, hey, there's just too many people. And we just got to get rid of this much percentage of the population. I'm not even going to talk about that argument because it, if you believe that, well, I guess everyone has their own beliefs. But for me personally, there's abundance everywhere. And all we have to do is actually work and provide value to one another or to create. I mean, we're talking about, and I don't know if you remember, last week I pulled up a document, a declaration that the White House put out based upon a gathering of the G20 ecosystems. And inside of it, they literally talk about how food will be just very scarce and they're very worried about food and the basis of food. So, how do you get fertilizer to be able to grow these monocrops? And then if you don't get the monocrops like the wheat, the soy, the corn, all of these different basics, then you can't build other basics. And so it's not just supply chain where people aren't getting paid or they're not moving infrastructure or supplies. It's a deeper issue. So yeah, and there's a lot of farming stuff that is just coming out of the woodwork. But imagine the ability for a digital world to connect to a physical world and to actually embrace the biggest thing that's going to be one of the next pucks that we all get to play to. It's an opportunity. So we just went through COVID for the last couple of years. We'll go through COVID 23 or 24, whatever you want to call it, or whatever variation, the next generation of pandemic, right? That it may be health based, but ultimately that's the health of the individual, the body, the family. But this earth has its own cycle. Just like the individual is being attacked with a purported virus, that who knows if it's man-made or not, the earth is basically having the same thing. And these are just my opinions. Take it for what you want. But literally the earth, you talk about seeding, you talk about what's these jet streams and what they're doing with certain types of beams. And I don't even want to say the words because some of the channels I'm streaming on, they'll get picked up. But um, a lot of the weather things are not natural, right? And maybe it's, all I can tell you is at the World Economic Forum 3 years ago, I told Jim Carrey, or it's not, no, his name is not John Kerry. I told him straight up, face to face, we don't have a global warming issue and a power issue because the technology is there. And it's not like we have to go and invent it. It's already in front of us. Why does the earth spin? Why do we have mountains that pop off the surface of the earth? And why is it that a cloud, when the earth is spinning and high and low and hot and cold pressures are going, why is it that lightning comes out of these clouds and then water comes out of it and it actually shifts from a gas to a liquid? If you look at Bose-Einstein condensates, which is what they call the scientific term for how basically quasars and this earth and this galaxy, all of it works, we have been given much more power than what we see in solar, than what we see in tidal. Because for those that aren't aware, you can actually generate power from tidal waves, just the waves. I love solar. I think it's so cool. But wind and hydro and even burning stuff. So they're saying, well, you burn diesel, you burn coal, you basically get these types of carbon in the atmosphere and this footprint. I promise you, all it is a way to be able to control and measure people. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's ludicrous that we're actually calling old dinosaur bones oil and we call it fossil fuels and we pump it from the earth. Then we put it in these tankers. Then we refine it. Then we put it in our cars and burn it in the atmosphere and say that we're actually, all of that stuff is illogical. What's happening with cars, and then we talk about one of the biggest issues with these electric cars or the lithium ion phosphate batteries. Yeah, you're pulling other nutrients and there's a carbon footprint for those, whether you're talking about getting the assets, distributing the assets, retiring the assets. But, in the end, we have a responsibility and a stewardship, not just over our own individual persons, or our families, but also collectively this earth. And it's not that I'm saying we should just literally sit back and just ignore what scientists or research are talking about global warming, because yes, it is real. But what causes it? Is it natural? Have we had enough data? And that's why I keep going back to the individual. If the individual can actually start collecting data, you would be amazed to understand we can get barometric pressure out of this thing. We can get humidity. We can get so many data points, and all of us have these data points. But imagine if we can actually use data in an anonymous way to actually collect it, to grab it. Because would people actually have problems if they were sharing data if they really knew it was anonymous? I promise you, Google and Apple, when they say that you're sharing data and it's anonymous, they're lying. You can spell, I can show you what to search to go find it. It's like they actually have access to your data. They have access to their phone in your hand when it's Apple. And for you to feel comfortable to share data, where you are, what you're doing, what you're spending, what you're thinking. I mean, it's a crazy stuff. When I talk about what you're thinking, that's a whole nother level. We'll get to that probably, well, probably next year. But the point that I'm driving at is we have an opportunity to be able to decentralize data and to create sovereignty through owning that data. It goes right back to what we were saying here before. We're not outnumbered. Will we be out organized? Because right now, based upon the numbers and the volume, we don't have enough to be able to make a difference. I'm grateful for each one of you that show up, learn these topics, listen to me blab. It's interesting how we originally started these ripple effects and kind of see how they're growing. But I don't know about you, but as we go into this Thanksgiving holiday, I would challenge you to just take some time, just kind of like you're reading these books and understanding concepts. Take some time and just write out or type out or text out things that you're grateful for. And then maybe start preparing your mind around how you can start setting goals. We talked about Tony Robbins earlier today, and some of the simple things that he talks about are true and correct principles. And there's nothing stopping, just like the earth has its own cycle, we as individuals, everything has its own cycle and time. I would challenge you right now to start pondering what you have been given, what gifts you have, simple things, a comfy bed to get into, clean water. You wake up in the morning and maybe you don't hurt, or maybe you go to bed and you're not hungry. There's so many gifts that we've been given. Maybe you have healthy kids. Maybe, yeah, you might deal with that kind of financial pressure, and your eyes have been open to certain things that are happening in the world, and you just feel this anxiety that's always there. But think about all the simple gifts that you've been given. Someone that loves you, someone that calls you mommy or daddy or grandma or grandpa. In my opinion, posterity is the most valuable gift in my world. These little, especially this guy here, but family, you know, and they're probably the ones that'll rub you the wrong way the most. And I don't know. I would just I would just challenge you to try and understand what gifts you've been given and then write them down, and then maybe appreciate them a little bit more than you. I remember, we had lots of kids young, and the house would be loud. And my thoughts, they're so important. I got to think, I got to have quiet time. I miss those days of those loud houses and those kids and the young voices. This last week, my better half put on My two oldest kids, when they were 5 and 6, maybe even 7, their teacher asked them questions about this time of year and just recorded it and put it on CDs. Remember those old things that you'd burn it onto CDs? Well, my oldest now is 24 and second oldest is 21. Maybe 20, going on 20. No, he's 21. Yeah, we lost a baby in between. But the point that I'm driving at is their voices aren't the same. Those loud days aren't the same. And I wished I probably would have just slowed down and appreciated some of those times while we were going through it. Even when you go and watch these crazy things like died suddenly, and they're so concerning and they're so in our faces and they're so real that you don't want them to be. It's like a nightmare. There's still a ton of joy everywhere around us. So I would urge you and challenge you to see it and to appreciate it. And then to maybe start planning to set your goals for 2023. I can't believe the whole year's gone. But anyhow, any feedback or comments before we wrap up? On the health, for those of you that haven't seen certain things, we'll play this video. Can you hear it? All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. Much love, everybody. We'll talk to you later.